this world. Now the roof seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Machel St. Patrick Hewitt, and with me as ever is my partner in crime, Santokie Nagilendran. Santokie, how you doing?
Yeah, all good, Mash, and we're here recording a special episode. Now, Super 50 went under the radar in terms of eyes on it. With the Cricket World Cup going on, most of the globe were focused on that. However, there was one West Indian story which sort of made headlines, or at least broke news across the world, and that was the announcement by 35-year-old king of spin, Sunil Narine, that he will be retiring. Well, he is retired from international cricket and also will no longer be playing List A cricket. Now, Sunil Narine hasn't played for West Indies since 2019, but I guess this sort of puts a full stop on any question marks about whether he will return to the setup ahead of the home World Cup for West Indies next year. Now, Machel, I know you've got his retirement statement in front of you, so you'll read it out. So if you want to read that out, and then afterwards, just give your own impressions or your reaction to his statement.
Yeah, so Sunil said, I appreciate that it's been over 4 years since I last played for West Indies, but today I'm announcing my retirement from international cricket. Publicly, I'm a man of few words, but privately, there are few people who have given me unwavering support throughout my career and helped me realise my dream of representing West Indies. And to you, I express my deepest gratitude, especially my family and in particular my father. He is ever present with me when I take to the field, and I'm indebted to his support and love, which carried me through the times I questioned whether the pursuit of my dreams was really worth it. Sunil continued, I would like to acknowledge and thank Cricket West Indies, the coaching staff and passionate West Indies fans, and of course my teammates who enabled me to play at the highest level in all formats and with some memorable successes. So, I mean, that was the kind of crux of his statement. Maybe there are bits and pieces more that I've missed out, but that was the essential crux of the statement. And it was a weird one, Santokie, because ultimately, first and foremost, you and I think we texted each other or sent a message in the WhatsApp saying, well, the obvious argument for most West Indian fans would be, well, we thought you'd retired anyway in all but name, right? And that's not a disrespect. I think that's a fair enough assessment. The kind of will he, won't he saga which had gone on for the 2021 T20 World Cup, and not so much, but also for the 2022 T20 World Cup. You and I had said that there was probably only a slim chance that he would accept a call to play in the 2024 home World Cup. And I guess, Santokie, handing it back to you, do you think this statement fundamentally came with that 2024 World Cup on the horizon, knowing the West Indian cricket public would, of course, say, well, what about Sunil Narine? And he would be in that same conversation with Andre Russell. What about this guy? What about that guy? Are we going to call them up? Are we not going to call them up? It's a home World Cup. Do you think it was primarily with that in mind that he ultimately put out this statement to say, I am now officially done?
Yeah, I think that definitely was probably a big reason. Obviously, as you said, it seemed to have been an annual occurrence in press conferences with lead selector Desmond Haynes. There was always a question about, will Sunil Narine be playing? And I guess what was strange about it was the ambiguity about it. It was kind of like, from Narine's side, there was never a definitive no. Even from Desmond Haynes' side, there wasn't even any indication that he was certain as to why Sunil Narine wasn't playing. So that kind of mystery in terms of whether he will or will not sort of frustrated fans. I think for West Indian fans, we see him in IPL year in, year out for 11 years now, take bags of wickets, get global accolades. And it's frustrating from a West Indian point of view to see him not play for West Indies. But I definitely think, obviously, with the home World Cup coming on, more pressure on West Indies to do well. There'll be more questions about why isn't Sunil Narine playing. So I think this sort of bookends that matter, sort of closes the chapter on whether he will or will not play. Obviously, there might be other factors as well. We don't know. As Narine said, he's publicly a man of few words. So I doubt we'll get any more beyond that statement. But as I said, it does close a chapter for Sunil Narine. And I think the initial reaction, Mash, from West Indian fans, at least the ones we've seen on social media, has been, not really anger, but disappointment that, he hasn't played for West Indies for the past 4 years. Sporadically, I guess you could argue, since 2014. He's really hasn't appeared much for West Indies. So that there's a lingering frustration. But I guess we're here to sort of dissect. I mean, we're not experts in the IPL, so we're not here to dissect his IPL records, but we're here specifically to focus on his West Indies legacy. And now he's retired, what does he leave behind for West Indies? And how would we evaluate his career? Because I think it's not a black and white case with Sunil Narine. Obviously, there were issues about his action, which prevented him from taking part in certain tournaments. However, you can't also deny the fact that he was a pivotal part of our 2012 T20 World Cup win. So with Narine, it's one that splits debate, but we're here to sort of look at what has been his legacy for West Indies cricket, Mash.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I'm going to try and put it out there from the jump, which is that in the context of, we have a fundamental, I'm going to call it badminism in the Caribbean, where we almost don't like to see our own players, and by our own players, I mean across the whole region, prosper unless they fit the right mold of what it means to be a cricketer, whatever that statement means, right? So if you say to somebody, Chris Gale was a GOAT of West Indies cricket, you'll find people wanting to fight that statement down, right? And say, but this, but that. So I know that if you and I now say Sunil Narine was a GOAT of West Indies cricket in a particular format, people won't hear that. They'll say, no, how can you say that? He didn't even play that many matches and da-da-da-da-da. So I think the first thing we have to do, Santokie, is just let the numbers talk for themselves, right? So I'm just going to read out his statistics, because I don't actually think people realize what his stats are, because they don't equate his career with a lot of game time for West Indies. So Sunil Narine has played 51 T20 internationals. He took 52 wickets at 21 apiece at an overall economy of 6. Okay, so 52 wickets at 21 apiece at an overall economy of 6. And of course, Santokie, he was a T20 World Cup winner in 2012. In ODI cricket, which I think is the thing that everybody overlooks, in ODI cricket, Sunil Narine played 65 ODIs and he took 92 wickets at 26 apiece with an overall economy of 4.13. Now, that's quite... Now, test matches, he obviously only played 3 test matches. And of course, people say, oh, but you don't want to mention his test record. Yeah, 21 wickets at 41. But we can get into that, or 40 even. We can get into that. 6 test matches, I should say. We can get into that at a later point, Santokie, and look at the kind of test career. But if you... The T20... I'm dying out here. The T20 career speaks for itself. But if we focus on ODIs first and foremost, Santokie, there are the only players in West Indies cricket with a better strike rate of 92 wickets in 65 ODI matches at 26 apiece, economy 4.13. When I looked at the kind of ODI records through the West Indian annals, the only people above Sunil Narine are all the recognised GOATs of West Indies cricket in terms of the fast bowlers, the Holdings, the Crofts, the Garners, etc. So I don't think we should be turning our nose up at what Sunil achieved in limited overs cricket.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think his ODI record sort of goes under the radar because he was so good in T20 cricket. And if you look at Narine's sort of rise in ODI cricket, well, he didn't really play for Trinidad and Tobago until 2011. He won the Super 50 with them. And then later that year, after the 2011 World Cup, he made his ODI debut. So really and truly, he only played ODIs for a few years. He played 65 in total. But his record match was impeccable in the format. I guess on the flip side, I guess one sort of disappointment with his career was he never played in the ODI World Cup. So in terms of context, there's nothing to measure it on. And I think that's where people kind of look down on his ODI record. But in and of itself, in bilaterals, he had a very stellar career in ODIs. And even if you mentioned briefly there, he played 6 test matches. If you're looking at the 6 test matches he played, the second ever test match he played against New Zealand at home, he was man of the match. And his last ever test match, he took 6 wickets in 1 innings in Hamilton in New Zealand, which is notorious New Zealand for being troublesome for spinners to take wickets on. So I think even in Test cricket, he showed promise. But however, like I said, it's not really a simple story with Narine, because if you're basing it at the beginning of 2014, he was one of the few multi-format stars we had, in terms of he was playing all 3 formats and doing well. However, 2014 was also the first time he got called up for his action in the Champions League that year. So I think if you're looking at Narine's career, it's important, I think, not because I think there's a perception that he chose not to play for West Indies, and he sort of opted out in terms of taking those franchise deals. I think 2014 and him being called up massively derailed his prospects, at least of Test cricket and to an extent ODI cricket, because once he did get called up at the end of 2014, he opted out of the 2015 ODI World Cup to work on his action. So I think you've got to factor in there were external factors as well, which hindered his prospects in the formats. And ultimately what it came down to was T20 cricket sort of, in terms of remodeling his action and sort of his style of play, T20 cricket suited his format and was also the most sustainable way of playing. So for him, he sort of narrowed down on playing T20 cricket, but it was sort of taken out of his hands, Mash.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important that you kind of note the action, because the action, like you said, ruled him out of the 2015 World Cup. The remodeled action, and because as much as people want to go, but the action, I think we have to remember these are human beings we're talking about. And when you get called on your action in cricket, you're not just losing your action. You're not just going to work away on your action. When you return, it's then about, do you have the confidence that you once had to bowl at the highest level? And I think sometimes there was this kind of feeling that I'll just get back in amongst it without understanding the human element of, well, this isn't actually as straightforward. What if I get the thing I would equate it to, Santokie, is like when a football player has a serious injury and then the first time they come back at the highest level on the football pitch, they're tentative, because then they don't want that injury to reoccur again. And now they're second guessing certain things and so on and so forth. And I don't think West Indian fans properly took that on board when Sunil came back. And that contributed to him not going to the 2016 World Cup as well. He didn't feel ready to be at that T20 World Cup. Obviously, we won anyway, but that also contributed to his absence. And I think the other thing we should throw in there is he had injuries as well, which is why when the 2019 ODI World Cup came about, although he was in consideration, actually he was nursing an injury. So it wasn't just, I don't think his story is as simple as Sunil Narine didn't want to play for the West Indies.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent summary, Mash. I think, as you said, you've got I think with elite sports, we often lose the humanity of it all. So I think for him, the perseverance and also the way he managed to sort of reinvent himself as a batter in T20 cricket, as an opening sort of pinch hitter batter, you have to credit him, because he always persevered and managed to sort of re-energize himself and with a remodel of who he was as a player. Because primarily when he did start out, at least for the West Indies, you wouldn't have considered him a batter at all. But especially in the IPL, he became an opener. I think he hit one of the fastest half centuries in IPL history. So just that perseverance to enable himself to remodel himself. But unfortunately, I think, yeah, like you said, the injuries and the toll of being called up meant that in terms of international cricket, it sort of went to the wayside, and he essentially focused in on franchise cricket. Now, Mesh, the other debate obviously is whilst he didn't play international cricket since 2016, he's been a regular for Trinidad and Tobago in the Super 50, and he actually in the final he took 3 more wickets to become cleared all-time leading wicket taker for Trinidad and Tobago, 97 wickets in Super 50. So ironically, whilst he hasn't been playing for West Indies, he's sort of been around domestically in the 50 over game, for starring for Trinidad and Tobago. With that one, how do you sort of interpret that one? Because obviously a lot of people will perceive it as, his loyalties with Trinidad and Tobago rather than West Indies, or do you just think Super 50 is more low key and it just allowed him to play sort of without that pressure?
I always got the sense with Sunil and playing for the Red Force, and you can, if we want to extrapolate that to the Knight Riders as well, that one thing that you can't throw at Sunil Narine is that he doesn't love giving back to Trinidad and Tobago cricket. And I don't think that's something to flog him with. I don't think that's something that we should kind of say, oh, but why did you play for Trinidad and why did you not play for West Indies? Man's from Trinidad. Man loves playing for Trinidad. I can't hate on him for that. And to be fair, Santokie, did Sunil not come back to play Super 50 when some international stars didn't want to come back to come and play Super 50? So we can't have our cake and eat it. We can't, on one hand, say, well, boy, our international players really need to come and play our domestic competition. Sunil Narine comes to do that. And then you say, why Sunil Narine only playing for Trinidad and not putting his name forth West Indies? But there's a big question mark in all of this for me, Santokie. And it goes back to the 2021 T20 World Cup in UAE or Dubai or whatever it was. Now, obviously, that World Cup was put off by a year because of the pandemic. It was originally supposed to be in 2020. Now, since the last time Sunil Narine played any form of international for the West Indies was in August 2019, which at that time would have been about a year out from when the T20 World Cup was due to take place. It's all hypotheticals. It's all hypotheticals. If the pandemic hadn't happened, do you think we would have seen Sunil Narine at that 2020 World Cup, given the rest of the band was getting back together anyway? Or do you think it would have been a stretch to get him back for 2020 as well?
Yeah, I personally think it would have been a stretch. I can't imagine him. I don't think necessarily the pandemic played a part. I think his mind had maybe already been made up. I know there are rumors that, he got a late call up from the band to try and get him in last minute to play in that World Cup. But I just think his mind had already been made up, regardless of whether there was a pandemic or not. And I guess that could have been a sliding doors moment, because I think once you've got Narine in UAE, where it was so conducive to spin, you essentially have 4 overs where you're not going to go for runs, and the opposition are probably going to lose wickets. So again, that even shows, whilst he didn't play for West Indies since 2019, that it was felt that he was missing, because they tried to get him back for 2021, and it sort of felt like, I know in 2016 we managed to win the World Cup with Suleiman Ben filling in as that secondary spinner, but it always felt like we had a big hole in the side, the T20 side, without Narine. And I guess that also kind of points to his impact that he made in a short period of time. He became such an integral part of that T20 setup, even up until now. If he hadn't have announced his retirement, we'd still be asking Desmond Haynes, is Narine going to get a call up? So that sort of points to his legacy, and sort of, if you're pointing at his GOAT status, the fact that no one's really come close in the West Indies to replicating his effect as a spinner.
Yeah, 100%. And as you were saying that, I was wondering, so what is the overall legacy of Sunil Narine? Because, but you may have actually just answered it. We've not seen anyone, and this, so what I'm saying here is, for anybody watching this, listening to this and thinking, oh, you lot are overstating the importance of Sunil Narine. Well, the question I would naturally ask off the back of that is, well, who's come close to emulating him since? It's not Roston Chase. So, like, who? Sunil Narine has set a bar that we haven't seen since Sunil Narine stopped playing for the West Indies. And yes, people can say, but we've got Gudakesh Motie coming through, and Akil Hussain has been, I would argue, more than useful on occasions in white ball cricket. But I think it shows just how high that Sunil Narine bar is, that he's had no natural successor. And what that kind of speaks to, Santokie, is that Narine trod his own path, his own unique path that will forever, well, not forever, but will certainly be saying for the next however many years, decades, whatever it might be, who's the next Sunil Narine. And from the minute you're answering that type of question, similar to who's the next Chris Gale, when you ask those type of questions, those questions by default indicate that the person you're answering that question about was some kind of GOAT, or set or trailblazed in some kind of way, that you're still looking for the next person to fill those massive boots or shoes.
Yeah, and I think it's telling, on our Super 50 review, we talked about Jason Holder and his comments about not the Caribbean not developing his game. Sunil Narine's an interesting one, because he went through an unorthodox route. He was initially called up for the under-19 Trinidad side as a batter who happened to bowl part-time spin. And then he didn't play for a while. It was 2011. They threw him into the Caribbean T20, as it was called at the time, and he did well there. And sort of he honed his skills playing softball in Trinidad, recreational game. So he didn't come through any sort of development system, or there wasn't any path. He sort of done it outside of all that. And that was also why he was unorthodox and successful. But I think when you're looking at, to your original question, when you're looking at his West Indies legacy, I think the fact that he was so pivotal in our win in 2012 means you have to give him respect, because we hadn't won any World Cup since 1979 up until that point. And 2012, in the final against Sri Lanka, he bowled 3.4 overs for, 9 runs and took 3 wickets. Ridiculous figures, which essentially swung the game in our favour and took us to the title. So I think you have to give him respect just for that alone, even if he didn't achieve anything afterwards in terms of West Indies colours. Just the fact in terms of what that World Cup meant for the region and how pivotal he was, Mash, you got to put respect on his name.
Yeah, and again, just to kind of question those who will hear you say that, Santokie, and still say but. Marlon Samuels, for all of Marlon Samuels' flaws, he is recognised throughout the region as, yeah, but look what he did in those 2 World Cups. Well, what Santokie is effectively saying is, well, look what Sunil Narine did in the 2012 World Cup. You take those 3.4 overs out, 3 for 9. Do we win that 2012 World Cup against Sri Lanka? Probably not. But because everyone's always so quick to say that batter won us a game, everyone talks about Marlon Samuels and the key innings that he played in 2012, but actually go back and look at who was the key strike bowler, who was the key wicket taker in that 2012 final, and it was Sunil Narine. So I think we just have to look at the wider context and understand that, yes, we would have loved to see Sunil Narine a lot more than we did as the years went on, but you can't question his contribution in a major. So you can't question the fact that he made a major contribution at a time when West Indies cricket didn't even know what success looked like.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think it's all about moments as well when you're analyzing someone's legacy. I mean, you mentioned someone like, all right, let's take for an example. That's not to even mock him or anything, but you mentioned Roston Chase. Roston Chase has probably played more West Indies games than Sunil Narine at this point, if you combine everything across formats. But has there been a defining moment in Roston Chase's career? You could argue that England winning the England series, West Indies series, but generally, if you're talking about big moments, what comes bigger than winning a World Cup? So for Narine to be pivotal in doing that means you have to respect his legacy and say he has had a positive impact and legacy on West Indian cricket. And also, I guess, I know we're talking about what he's done in an actual West Indies jersey. Just the fact he's West Indian and what he's done across the world surely would inspire, particularly people in Trinidad, like youngsters as well. So if you take that into account as well, the legacy he has would be far-reaching, Mash. And as I said, I think he's a trailblazer in terms of spinning in the format and his impact. And just the fact we've never come close to replicating anyone like that in the region just sort of shows his sort of GOAT status, at least in T20 format. My only disappointment is that we didn't get to see him more in ODI cricket, and particularly red ball cricket. When I interviewed him, he did talk about it being his favourite format, and he wished he could play it more. And tellingly, Mash, when I asked him what has been your career highlight, winning the IPL or the World Cup, he could have easily said the IPL. It was going out for an predominantly Indian publication that would have, got all the clicks and rebate. But he said winning the 2012 World Cup will forever be his highlight. So that sort of shows he still has some sort of love and loyalty towards West Indies. It was just like I said, other factors cut it short. But I think to answer the question, as you said, Mash, I'm sure in the comments people hit us up and be like, nah, what are you guys talking about? Sunil Narine, he abandoned West Indies as a mercenary. But from my perspective, Mash, his legacy, he has a far-reaching legacy and impact on West Indian cricket.
I don't think I could put it any better. It seems like the natural way to almost end this kind of quick deep dive into Sunil Narine. But I will just raise one thing, Santokie. We're undoubtedly going to get a lot of listeners to this episode from the Asian subcontinent, as well as the Caribbean, because of Sunil Narine's reach is global. It's well beyond the shores of the different Caribbean nations and the Caribbean region. Is it a silly question? Is it a sheer matter of population size? Or would it be fair to say, Santokie, that we as a region have not respected our recent GOAT generation and their accolades and contributions to West Indies cricket more than people outside the region do. So if, for example, Santokie, guess what I'm saying is somebody from the Asian subcontinent will watch this and go, well, of course Sunil Narine's a GOAT. Why is this even a video? Why are you even talking about this? But we're doing it because we know that there will be plenty of people in the Caribbean who will question it. But why do you think that is, Santokie?
That could be an episode in itself. I partly think, you know, the campaign against, remember there was that newspaper, I forgot which island it was from, and it had pictures of Narine, Russell, Gale, and it had like a big cross across their name saying they were mercenaries because they'd abandoned the side, they'd abandoned West Indies. I just think there was a smear campaign against that GOAT generation and them quote unquote being mercenaries. And I guess it's a domino effect. Once you see someone like a Dre Russell and Narine start playing less and less for West Indies, as a fan, your frustration grows. Whereas Indian fans have seen Narine and Russell play 11 years consecutively for Kolkata Knight Riders and seen them consistently year on year, whereas we haven't got that in the West Indies. So I think it's a combination of just the perception given out about these players and quote unquote being mercenaries, whereas now essentially players turning down national games to play in franchise tournaments is a common thing. At that time, it wasn't seen as much across country, so they were portrayed as mercenaries. So I think that has played a part. And just the visibility, Mash, I think the fact that IPL, like you said, they play every single year, they have more eyes on them, it's a bigger population. So I think that it's interesting, the perception between a lot of West Indian fans, what their perception of Narine compared to Indian fans. I think Indian fans, like you said, would be asking, it's not even a debate. Like, obviously, Narine goes down as one of the greats. So it's interesting, and that's why we had to make this video, Mesh.
100%. So listen, let's give the people a challenge then. Having watched this video, people, get at us in the comments below. Let us know, is Sunil Narine a GOAT of West Indies cricket, yes or no? And irrespective of what your answer is to that question, what is your favourite Sunil Narine moment? Ideally, we want you to say West Indian moment, but I'm fairly certain that Bear Man are going to get in these comments and talk about some IPL moment. But what is your favourite Sunil Narine moment? And leave your reflections in the comments below about his legacy and contribution to West Indies cricket. As ever, we've been the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We caught some flack recently, Santokie. They said we're not positive enough. Was that positive?
Yeah, we've been catching strays, you know. We've been catching strays in the comments. So yeah, hopefully this isn't too negative for those of you listening. But you know, like we say, Mash, on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, we always keep it real. Obviously, if you don't like it, it is what it is. This is our opinion. It's not going to change. So we'll be back very soon. I think we're doing a preview of the West Indies A Tour of South Africa. If you haven't already, do check out our Super 50 review show. If you're on our YouTube page, it will be under the live section, so it won't be under videos. Go to live. You'll see a Super 50 review, and you can make your own judgment whether we were being too harsh and critical or we called it how it is. It seems to have divided a lot of fans, Mash. But as ever, Caribbean Cricket Podcast, our mantra is always to keep it honest, and we call it how we see it.
For real. Before you go, people, like the video, share the video, subscribe to Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And of course, if you want to contribute to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, head to www.patreon.com/Caribbean Cricket. Stay locked in for more content. We'll see you soon.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.